Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video, we'll be taking a look at upcoming Tuesday/Wednesday when the servers reset hotfixes that are being applied for a variety of different specs in the game, mostly DPS, that are just not performing well. We're not taking a look at Fire Mages, which are doing fairly well, Subtlety Rogues, DPSing down everybody with 100% crit on the meters, Windwalkers on Holy Death Knights, and even Boomkins with massive convokes. A lot of those classes and specs are doing really well, but the specs that are underperforming, the real underdogs, are actually so far behind that it's very difficult to even make them viable. Not even great or top tier, but viable for the raiding encounters. So Blizzard is going to be doing on the next reset, and these are some preliminary stuff that we can see. Next reset should have a lot of juicy updates for classes and specs that definitely truly needed them. So let's take a look at what Blizzard has so far for future updates. The first class on the list is going to be Death Knights. We take a look at two changes, one for Frost DK and one for Blood. Blood Death Knights somewhat recently have gotten some updates and buffs to their damage, mostly to help them have an easier time tanking things, which isn't going to make them DPS maniacs out of nowhere or anything. However, their defensiveness sometimes can be a little bit lacking. I feel like Blood Death Knights, and a lot of you guys will agree, are generally good for tanking a lot of the magic damage, since when it comes to magic damage as a tank, you don't really have a lot of mitigation, but together with AMS, Rune Tap, as well as self-healing capabilities, you could take a powerful hit of magic damage and heal right through it, and tanks that can self-heal can generally deal with magic damage easier. So Blood Death Knights can do magic damage fairly okay. However, physical damage they can be overpowered with. So Bone Shield getting a nice armor buff from strength with this Tuesday/Wednesday update is always going to be a good thing to make Death Knights, particularly Blood, a little bit tankier. Then we also have a change for Frost Death Knights where all damage is increased by additional 2% while wielding a two-handed weapon, which is a good thing. It's not going to be a massive buff that's all of a sudden going to make two-hand playstyle the meta, but I think they're just trying to make it a little bit closer with this change to the dual-wield playstyle. There's definitely advantages and disadvantages depending on what weapon you use for Death Knights, and I personally like the two-hand playstyle, so even a 2% buff I think is going to be quite nice. Next buff we have is to Mages. Those that have been playing Frost or been hoping that Frost will be as insane as it was on the beta probably were disappointed with Frost doing very minimal damage. Actually, the literally bottom DPS of all the DPS right now when it comes to Castle Nathria. So rejoice Frost Mages with a 9% buff to all of your abilities. This is quite huge for Frost Mages, but it's not nearly gigantic. What I mean by this is I don't think you're going to have mages rerolling from Fire to Frost all of a sudden for Castle Nathria or Mythic Pluses, but those mages that wanted to play Frost Mages will now be more likely to want to go back to the favorite spec because the damage should be at least viable. It won't be maybe anything like top tier, but maybe in certain situations it could be more competitive. Frost definitely has advantages in Mythic Pluses with all the slows from all your Frost abilities, the natural cleave that happens with most of the talent setups. Frost just has such a nice toolkit, and not having the damage behind that toolkit makes it really difficult to pick Frost Mages as a class. For Brewmaster as well as Windwalker, we're seeing a very similar change that happened to Frost Death Knights. All damage is increased by additional 2% while two-handed weapon is equipped. I guess it was maybe a little bit of a disbalance for Brewmasters and Windwalkers in what weapon types you ran. I believe with this change, there is going to be Windwalkers and Brewmasters that wanted a two-hand playstyle that will like this, but I think essentially for monks, it'll end up coming down to, well, with a dual-wield playstyle, that's two weapons, one in each hand, and that's two different enchants you could put up, one on each weapon, and two enchants will generally be better than one single enchant, but who knows? So I don't think this is going to change the meta for monks that much, or I'll be very surprised if it does, but a 2% damage increase will hopefully help bridge the gap a little bit between the dual wield and the two-hand playstyle, whether you're someone who does have your best in slot, one-handers with a bunch of enchants, or if you're just running with a good old dual wield weapon from a raid or a dungeon you've done recently. Then we got a big one for Assassination Rogues, and Assassination Rogues should honestly rejoice because they've gotten buffed by 8%. No, it's not like a 20% buff, it's not a 30%, 40%, where lots of players were asking, hey, can we just get 100% more damage and we'll be good to go? There's been a lot of things that were to consider when it comes to playing Assassination, and one of them was the damage is very underwhelming. There was literally no sim that I could do, and I did decide to go and do a bunch of sims on my rogue in order to set up the best possible setup. If I were to, for example, let's say try to main assassination, what would be my best in slot gear and my best in slot performance? And the spec was severely underperforming. I mean, it was crazy. In best in slot gear, it was able to achieve the numbers my current rogue has, and my rogue isn't even halfway to his best in slot. He's getting there, but he's nowhere close to complete. So that's actually kind of crazy that Assassination was just that heavily behind every other spec. So hopefully this change will actually be pretty good. And actually checking out with some of the guys over on the Rogue Discord, it does change the spec from a non-preferable, non-usable to actually raid viable and PvE viable. Assassination always had really cool legendaries to play with, and as someone who plays a lot of rogue, I paid attention to all the different specs that are available, and Assassination always had some really cool setups for it. However, just the damage was never really good enough in order to even try to make a potential build, but it always was an enjoyable playstyle with a lot of potential for big AoE damage or even burst a single target. So, rogues, you should rejoice. This actually might give a lot of you that want to play Assassination stick to your guns and be able to actually make Assassination properly work, maybe with a little bit more effort than others, but definitely make it more workable in PvE content. And in the same note, Fury Warrior is also getting a buff as well. Just like Assassination Rogues, we're seeing an 8% damage increase for all abilities except for Bladestorm, as well as Dragon Roar. However, with Fury Warriors, we're also seeing a nerf of Meat Cleaver. Meat Cleaver talent now increases your Whirlwind's damage by 25% instead of 30%. However, I feel like all the damage abilities, being able to do more damage, like your Whirlwind doing 8% more damage, Meat Cleaver being slightly nerfed just kind of counteracts it, so it basically doesn't really change too much. Bladestorm and Dragon's Roar not getting a buff is interesting, but I think that's because those abilities are actually getting a little bit better when it comes to PvE content, and the different legendary synergies they have probably makes them way too strong and way too good to play with. So this should be a nice buff for any of you that played Fury. For a lot of you guys, Fury Warrior was actually your favorite playstyle when it comes to warriors and a variety of different specs of the last expansion. And it was so weird that Fury Warriors just were not performing the numbers, which they were in desperate need of, by the way. And compared to their arms brethren, it was a very, very fun playstyle that a lot of you guys were vibing with, but just not a lot of people could really justify playing a Fury Warrior because arms was just overshadowing it so heavily that something must have needed to be done. And that's going to be the update of the class changes that we'll be getting in the next few days before the week's reset. And these are looking really, really cool. Blizzard said that these are not finalized by any measure, but these do look promising. At least it's a start, and at least they're taking it somewhere. I don't imagine any of these specs that are getting buffed to all of a sudden become meta, but I do imagine people that are playing those specs, or people that used to play those specs from previous expansion, might actually give it another go, because all these playstyles are actually quite fun. The Assassination Rogue with your dot meta, the Fury Warrior with the constant consistent damage, the Frost Mages that have a little bit of burst, a little bit of cleave, but always slows baked into their playstyle, which I would imagine would be insanely good for Mythic Pluses. Just kind of slow the enemies down with blizzards while the tank kites them forever without mobs ever touching them. And even for Blood Death Knights while we are at it, having Blood Death Knights do a little bit better when it comes to physical damage to be a little bit better as tanks, where I feel like they, as one of the tanks, was kind of underwhelming when it comes to the PvE tank content, maybe apart from Protection Warrior. I feel like this are some good changes, at least for now. And there was also supposed to be a patch 9 point something on PTR, a brand new patch, and might even be a content patch or a 0.5 patch, which usually introduces a lot of class changes. So I wonder if Blizzard will save majority of class adjustments for that kind of patch, which should be hitting PTR sometime soon. That will definitely be interesting. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts about the changes that are upcoming very, very soon. And if this list changes, I'll make sure to update you guys on the Tuesday, Wednesday reset. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see all of you in the next one.